Hey y'all, welcome back to the Of Earth and Ether podcast with your host, Bria, founder of Herbal Everything's a holistic wellness brand. So, I think I said last episode that it was episode 5, but I was lying on accident. This is episode 5, and today we're going to be getting into the energetics of the menstrual cycle. So, this is really going to be like a generic processing outline, we'll say, that can help any and every woman as far as expression and processing and better outcomes with their reproductive health without getting into your specific energetics or your specific dosha. So before we get started, disclaimer: none of the information in this podcast is meant to replace the advice of a licensed medical professional. I am not a licensed medical professional, nor am I supposed to be one. All of the information presented in this podcast is purely for educational purposes. It's not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any diseases, but it's purely for educational purposes. So let's get right in it. Who? Okay. So the last few episodes, what was the last episode? I was talking about mental mirror. So episodes 1 through 3 were laying the groundwork. So we got into um the manifestation process of how everything becomes a thing, going from mental spiritual plane to the emotional plane and then becoming physical. We got into a basic breakdown of what a dosha is, or your energetic constitution, or your biological energy, whatever you want to refer to it as, so that it makes sense to you. And then I gave y'all some examples on how you can see those aspects personified. So yeah, if you have not watched the first 3 episodes, definitely go watch that, because if you didn't, you're probably not going to know anything that I'm talking about right now. It's probably not going to make sense to you. So the energetics of the menstrual cycle. We are conditioned to believe in this society that the things that we experience on our periods, it like cramps, extremely painful cramps. It's one thing to have a cramp. It's another thing to have a cramp that puts you out of commission. Extremely painful cramps. These crazy mood swings to the point where some people literally be contemplating unaliving themselves. Being so depleted that you feel like you can't even get out the bed. All of these things we are told is just a quote unquote normal part of being a woman, but it's like, no, those things are not normal. Common, we can say, but that's because, we all eating off the same food system. We all was taught the same food pyramid, and those things don't account for differences in genetics, energetics, etc. But not only are they not normal, but they're not random. So these are not just random occurrences that happening. It's not your body attacking you. She's not trying to jump you. She's not betraying you. She's trying to talk to you. She's communicating to you, and that's how she does it. She communicates through cramps. She communicates through energy dips and rises. She communicates through tension versus super loose. Like, that's how our bodies communicate to us, because not everybody can actually speak words and hear words back. So the body communicates through physical means because it is a physical thing. So these things are not random. And we need to start looking at our menstrual cycles, not just the physical menstrual week where you're bleeding, but the whole cycle as a report card. And you get the report card when your period comes. But the other 3 weeks of your cycle is like you doing your work during the semester. You going to classes during the semester. Like, you putting in the work for whatever you're going to receive on that report card. That's how we need to start looking at our periods, as opposed to just this thing that I'm cursed with, and she's attacking me, my body's betraying me. Like, that's not what's happening. She's just reflecting back to you everything that you put in or did not put in that you needed to, everything that you did, everything that you didn't do within the previous 3 weeks of that cycle. So painting that generic framework, like I said, this pattern of the menstrual cycle energetics is relevant to every woman, regardless of your dominant doshas, and things like that. So the seasonality of the menstrual cycle. The menstrual cycle can be equated to all of the seasons that we experience in nature. It's just a smaller version of it, right? So you have, in the grander scheme of things, you have 4 seasons. You have spring, you have summer, you have fall, you have winter. On a calendar, it goes through that cycle every 12 months. But within your body, you go through that 4-stage cycle every single month. So every single phase of our cycles can be compared to one of the seasons of nature, and everything that's happening in nature at that season is the same thing that's happening in your body. Everything is everything else. Like I keep saying, everything is everything else, and everything is connected to everything else. Nothing is separate. Separation is an illusion. So if we're looking at nature outside and what's happening there and what should be happening during those time periods, that will help us see what's happening inside of our bodies and what should be happening inside of our bodies. Also, what should not be happening when you're looking at the outside and the inside. Everything is mirroring each other. As above, so below, as within, so without. Everything is everything else. So when we connecting the seasons of the year to the menstrual cycle, energetics wise, let's start with spring, right? So let's look at nature because everybody can see that. In the springtime, what's happening? So the weather is warming up. It's going from the cold stillness of winter. Everything starts to warm up. The days get longer. We're experiencing more sunlight. The weather is slowly and slightly warming. The birds and the animals start coming back outside. This is when, me being a farmer gardener, we start putting our seeds in the ground, starting our seeds, whether it's inside seed starting or you direct seeding. All of these things happen in the spring, so everything's starting to wake up. As you get later into the spring, that's when the plants and the trees start flowering, and that's where all the pollen and everything comes around, right? So springtime outside, things are warming up, starting to move after the stillness and coldness of winter, and things are getting started when you're looking at gardening, farming, animals starting to come back outside after hibernation. Things are getting started. It's building up. The momentum is starting to climb up, right? That's outside. Turn that inward. Our inner spring is our follicular phase. So your follicular phase is that week right after your period stops, right? So you have menstruation. This is what I see a lot of women refer to this as our 1 week of normalcy, and I 100% agree. This is that 1 week of normalcy where everything, like, you focused, your energy level starting to climb back up after your period, your sex drive not crazy, but like, it's building up. Like, this is that period. So your follicular phase is our inner spring. This is when things are starting to wake back up. This is when the body is preparing for the egg to be released during ovulation, but it's not there yet. It's preparing. Just like you see starting, you don't have crops to harvest yet, but it's getting started. Everything's starting to warm back up. Everything's starting to get flow. That's why your energy levels start coming back up, because there's more movement happening now. That's why your focus is better, because there's more movement happening now. Everything is getting warmed up. It's starting. And during that phase, just like in the springtime, outside in nature, we should be planting and sowing. That's just the best word I could think of, is sowing. So I don't want to say planting, because that's low-key a winter thing. You should be planting in the winter. And I have a different perspective of this being a farmer. You plant in the winter. By the time spring comes, you're ready to move. So this is when you putting all of your plays into action. You're starting the action of it. This is when we should be starting little things, like maybe you send an invitation for something that you want to do later. Maybe you Um, if you're working on a business venture or whatever with somebody, or even if it's not business, a creative adventure or whatever, this is when y'all are getting the foundations laid. This is when you're physically outside of you tilling the soil. This is when you're starting seeds. This is when you're waking everything back up. So that connects to how your expression should be inside. Just look at what's happening outside. Outside, everything is warming up, turn it back on. So you should be too. Biologically, you are. But how are you emotionally and mentally during that phase? You should also be waking up and turning things back on after the stillness of winter / menstruation. That's spring, right? Summertime. What's happening outside? It's hot. It's not warming up. At this point, it's hot. It's hot. The days are long. Um, your fruiting crops are starting to produce fruits. The flowers are in full bloom. They just, they're beautiful. Hey, y'all, look at me. Everybody outside. Everything is active. All the trees are green. It's just a time for activity, full activity, peak activity. That's what's happening on the outside during the summertime. It's hot, though. It's hot. Depending on your climate, it could be moist or dry, but it's hot. Everything is outside. This is when the most activity is taking place. Turn that in. Ovulation is our inner summertime. I need to stop hitting my mic. Sorry, guys. Ovulation is our inner summer. Energetically, it's hot. It's real hot. And heat is equated to metabolic activity. So during this time frame, technically ovulation is really the window technically is, I'm gonna stretch it and say 72 hours, but in real life it's really 24. But I'm gonna say 72. But even when you're looking at that, I just go ahead and be safe, count a whole week. That's very important if you're somebody that's sexually active, because you might not be able to get the exact date, but if you know the week, then you know how to move. But technically it can really only be shrunk down to a 72-hour window, and even that's a stretch. But same thing happening. This is the highest activity, peak activity. It's hot. At this point, you feral. Like, sex drive, you going crazy. Some people might view that as an inconvenience, but at the end of the day, that insinuates fertility, and fertility is health. Even if you're not trying to conceive, you should still be fertile, because that insinuates that your body is moving the way it's supposed to move. So that's healthy. You should be having a high sex drive at that point in time, but that's when the most activity is taking place internally, biologically. The most activity is taking place. You should also be doing emotionally, mentally. That's when you should be doing your heaviest work. This is when you should be doing presentations, hosting seminars, if that's the type of work you get into, scheduling your shows. If you like artists and you have shows, your show should be planned for when you're ovulating. I record my videos during my ovulation week, with the exception of this month. I had a special situation, but I typically record my videos during my ovulation week, because that's when I'm feeling the most social. That's when you are most magnetic, whether you realize that or not. And that's not something you have to try to do. Biologically, you do it. Our skin clears up. It gets brighter. Our pheromones increase. All of that happens during ovulation. You're at the highest peak. Just like the summertime, everything is out and active at that point in time. And it's just, hey, y'all, just like the flowers be, hey, y'all, that's how you should be. So physically, biologically, that's already going to happen on its own, unless you have some issues that need support. But emotionally and mentally, you need to follow suit, right? So now we in fall. This is a very interesting time period, because the luteal phase is the introduction into menstruation. And my entire perspective, framework, everything is centered around the fact that everything starts off in the mental and spiritual plane before it becomes physical. It goes from mental / spiritual to emotional to physical. What? What, girl? What you talking about? Oh no, not my battery's low. Oh God. Okay, hold on. Let me. What do? I don't want it to die in the middle. Oh God. Okay, let's pause it. Okay, y'all, we charging. So, like I was saying, the luteal phase is a very interesting phase because this is the onset towards menstruation. And your purge, so the shedding of the uterine lining or periods is a physical purge, but as everything I've been saying, everything starts off mentally and emotionally first. So prior to you experiencing the actual physical purge of your uterine lining shedding and your period starting, you're going to experience an emotional purge. Luteal phase. This is where all of those feelings come up. But we've been starting on the outside, so let's look at the outside first. Outside, fall, what's happening? The leaves are starting to change colors. They're going from green, which if you're looking at the heart, this blew my mind when I peeped it. Um, Leaves and plants in general are green. That's heart chakra color. That is existence, just simply being. That's green. That's what color they are all summer. They just exist. They're being. And they fall back into a point of survival as it goes, um, as the seasons change and it gets colder and they turn back inward. So they go from green to orange to yellow to red. I think I said that backwards, but y'all get the point. Like those are the bottom three chakras. That's the physical, and it's going back down to survival in the red, and at that point it falls off and now it's browning on the ground. But everything's starting to purge. So during the summer when the leaves were just green, they were taking in energy, taking in the experiences, just existing. But all of the experiences that they gathered from existing during the summertime, they are now shedding those experiences as the leaves fall off. So the leaves are falling off. Everything that was happening during the summer is starting to slow down. The weather is starting to cool down. Um, if you farm and gardening, this is typically when you start having your largest harvest. Early fall, late fall, things start, that's when the plants, the herbs, everything stop producing or whatever. But you typically have your largest harvest during the fall. So you're harvesting the fruits of what you planted in the spring and tended to in the summer. You're collecting that during the fall. You're shedding what you took in that pat this year. You're letting it go. The leaves are changing colors and everything is slowing down. People are starting to turn inward. There's less activity outside, again, depending on where you at in the part of fall you're in, whether it's early or late. That'll depend on what's happening, but at the end of the day, everybody not outside 24/7. Some people might still be outside, little fall events, pumpkin patches, stuff like that, but people are starting to turn inwards. The food is starting to warm up because the weather is starting to cool down. And again, warmth is equated to metabolic activity. So cold is naturally equated to a lack of metabolic activity. We're staying in our houses more. We're turning inward and we're letting go of, or shedding, I should say. We're turning inward and we're starting the process of shedding what we just got from the previous 2 seasons. Externally, turning inward. What's happening? Physically, your body is preparing to purge physically. So your estrogen drops, progesterone initially rises and then eventually drops, which starts your period. But your hormones are now changing. Your estrogen drops, that means your energy drops. That means your sex drive drops. That means that your focus drops. That don't necessarily equate to estrogen, but at the same time, your focus drops. That's the mental starting to prepare for that purge. The focus is not there. This is when internal heat rises, but at the same time, our bodies are turning more towards coldness and stillness of winter. It's just not there yet. It's in between. But biologically the heat is rising. That's why because that would naturally be the next step if you did get pregnant. But if you didn't, then it's just going to go forward to shedding. But the heat rises. That's why we get hotter during this phase. That also equates to estrogen, not deficiency, decreasing that heat. Our bodies get hotter, but it's also at the same time preparing towards stillness. But your focus dwindles. The emotions. come up, that's when all of the sadness, all of the crying, all of the spazzing out, cursing people out, all of that typically comes here. And let me keep going before I get there. But at this point, luteal phase is our inner fall. This is the week before your period, leading up to your period. Everything that you just took in the first 2 weeks, it's now about to shed, preparing to shed. Think about this as the leaves changing colors before they drop. They're changing colors. And during that transition process, it's like whatever was fed during the spring and the summer, now it's going to show up. So when it comes to the emotional aspect of the luteal phase, again, mind, spirit to emotions to physical body. The mental focus dwindling. That's the first signal. Okay, things are changing, right? By the time you get to your emotions, I have recognized in my experience, especially when it comes to recurring topics that make you sad, that make you angry or whatever during your luteal phase, whatever emotions are stored in your womb are going to come out during your luteal phase. I'm going to say that 2 more times. Whatever emotions are stored in your womb are going to come out during your luteal phase. Whatever emotions are stored in your womb are going to come out during your luteal phase. The mental purge, that's the focus dwindling. The emotional purge, every emotion that's stored in your womb is going to come up before she physically purges, because that's just how the cycle of manifestation goes. I noticed that, I learned that because with me having an issue of stagnation, which might not be everybody's issue, but I started paying attention to the fact that every single month when I would get sad, I was getting sad about the same 2 situations. The same 2. Every single month, it was the same shit. And at one point, I just so happened to just reflect, it ain't like I'm getting sad over something different. Like I see a dead squirrel in a row and I start crying. I be getting sad about the same stuff every month. That was when it clicked. That's because that's what's in your womb. The emotion is going to come out before the physical purge comes out. So what's happening outside in the fall? People are slowing down. People are warming up, nurturing themselves more. This is when you have your hot chocolates, your warm apple ciders, your desserts, family events, bonfires, baking apple pies and stuff together. It's a very nurturing space during the fall. That's what you should be doing too, because your body is in a transitional period, just like fall is a transitional period. Your body is in a transitional period, and she's getting ready to purge. And again, depending on how the first couple of seasons of the cycle went, the first couple of weeks of your cycle went, that's what's going to determine how smoothly or how chaotic your purge goes. So your body is already doing what it does at the physical level. You need to be mimicking what we do externally during the fall with yourself. More warmth. Slow down. Sit down. Sit your ass down. Sit down. And love on yourself. Warm beverages. If you're looking with herbs, depending on your constitution, you might not want to work with warm beverages. Physically warm, cool, but energetically warming herbs and stuff like that, that would depend on your constitution, because that could agitate you, but that's an individual case by case basis. But the point is warming, nurturing drinks, spending time with family, people you love. Notice something else I noticed, and I'm sure it was the case for a lot of people. A lot of that emotional chaos that happens at that point in time be connected to the desire for connection and intimacy. It might not even necessarily be that, and it could be, but it might not necessarily be that you hate the world. You just want a hug. But it just depends on you, your personality, like you as a person, your being, your energetic makeup. That's going to determine, is it coming out as irritation and spazzing, or is it coming out as crying all the time and being like, just downy, what's it called? Downy Debbie Downer, being a Debbie Downer. Like, or whether you just get anxious as hell and everything just sets you off and you just hypersensitive. All of that is going to be, that's the expression of it is going to look different based on your doshas, your energetic constitution. But at the end of the day, all of those things are signs for what you really need and what's stored in your womb. So mimic what's happening externally for yourself during your inner fall. And then we get to winter. So outside winter, what's happening? All the leaves have already fell off the trees. All the plants have gone dormant for the season. Um, it's cold outside. It ain't cooling down. It's cold. It's cold and moist because you think it's snow, stuff like that. But it's cold outside. The nights are longer. All the animals be put up, you know, and nothing is happening outside. Everybody is in the house. Everybody inside, cooling, watching TV, watching movies. Like, everything outside though is still and it's resting. It's still and it's resting, and it's recharging for the next year. If you're a farmer, this is when we plan. We plan in the winter so that when spring comes, we're ready to move. You're planning for your next year. Some trees shed their leaves faster than others. So the trees who hold on to their leaves longer, they're dropping the last of their leaves from this past year during the winter so that they can start off the new year with a completely clean slate. So it's a purge, but it's like a still purge. It's like the purge and then the stillness surrounding that to allow everything to set in. And then you got the snow that's helping to break down the leaves that's in the grass so they decompose into the soil and feed the soil for the next year. But the experience of those leaves are now being added to the soil, so it's not forgotten. Everything is cyclical. Everything. Everything is everything. Y'all gonna hear me say that probably every episode. Everything is everything. But that's what's happening externally, right? So internally, what's happening? Period. Purging. Now your physical purge has taken place. The emotional, mental purge started in the luteal phase. At this point, once your progesterone drops, now you're physically purging. Your period starts. So that's what's happening biologically. Your uterine lining is shedding. So what's happening outside? You should be doing the same thing. You should be resting, working out. Sit down. Sit your ass down. If nobody else, I'm going to tell you, sit the F down. Sit down. Rest. You're not going to lose 3 years of gains if you take a week off every month. Sit down. Rest. They're working out 24/7 can mess up your hormones anyway. They need a reset. Everything in nature takes time to reset. Everything. So you sitting down, you need to slow down. And warmth, because at this point it's cold outside. So you're in the winter, you're cold too. And that's where warmth, keeping your feet warm because your feet are directly connected to your uterus. Again, warm beverages. The herbs in the beverages depend on your energetic constitution if it's a herbal drink. But warm beverages, staying in the house, resting, spending time with people you love, and planning. You're reflecting on what you did the past cycle and how that's showing up in your current cycle. How easily or chaotically did your period come down and why? How smooth or chaotic was your luteal phase and why? What did you do this past cycle? How's your cycle? How did it come down differently than how it did the month before? And what were you doing during that cycle that could contribute to that? Right? This is a reflection period. And winter is actually strong kapha energy. Kapha is the dosha of water and earth. And water is reflective. You look in water, it's going to look back at you. You're going to see yourself looking back at you. That's reflection period. So you're in stillness, you're resting, recovering from all the, everything that just happened the past cycle, but you're also reflecting and planning so that the next time around you can do differently. So with all of that being said, your expression at each stage is going to influence how your period comes down. In addition to, physical factors like nutrition, environment, all of that. But all of those things play into how your period shows up that month, both in the luteal and the actual menstruation phases. So if your expression is stifled at whatever phase for whatever reason, it's going to show up in your period. And if we're looking at it from a nature example, the slightest thing, you may think it's slight, but The slightest thing. If you in the summertime and you supposed to be out, you're supposed to be being seen, you're supposed to be expressing, you're supposed to be presenting, and you're not doing that. You're hiding yourself because you have mental, emotional issues that you have not addressed, physical issues that you have not addressed. It's causing you to want to hide yourself. Now you're not expressing yourself during in the summer. You tucked away, you here, you acting like it's winter when you should be outside. That's going to affect the way that your period comes down, because at this point, at that point in your cycle, you should be expressing and highest activity. But now you're altering the energetics of the cycle. That's just like if you put it on an external perspective, you're now altering the energetics of what's happening outside. So let's give it a practical example. If we're looking at nature, so let's say it's summertime, since we talk about summertime, all the flowers be full bloom, right? That's the expression. The most simple, authentic form of expression there is a flower existing in bloom. So let's just say that flower, for whatever reason, felt insecure, or all the flowers felt insecure, and they just decided, my leaves are so ugly, I'm not going to bloom this summer. I'm not going to bloom this summer, right? That one decision affects everything else, because if there are no flowers open, the bees have no food. If the bees have no food, they're not going to, one, be able to survive to pollinate other crops that need, that transfer of pollen to pollen from the bees. So they might not even survive themselves due to starvation. But if they do, damn, I just lost my train of thought. We gotta get that back. Hold on. I was talking about flowers and bees. Shit. Okay. So the bees not having, the flowers are not open, and the bees can't eat. So, there we go. Okay, so the pollen. So the bees themselves might not survive. But on top of that, the pollen from the plants, the flowers that are supposed to be open and expressing themselves, they're not there. The pollen isn't there. So now all these other crops that require pollination, anything that fruits, tomatoes, bell peppers, cucumbers, all of these things that need a bee with pollen on it to touch in order for it to produce fruit, now they're not producing fruit. So now none of the vegetables and the fruits that need pollen from the flowers that's supposed to be expressing themselves, now they're not able to produce. So now you got a whole bunch of barren crops. And barren crops means that the people who grew the crops, they're not gonna have nothing to eat. They ain't gonna have nothing to eat because their crops are not producing any produce. They ain't gonna have nothing to eat, right? So now the people gotta change their whole everything. They gotta find a whole new source of food, because the crops that they planted didn't produce, because there was no pollen. There was no pollen because the flowers were insecure and didn't want to express themselves and bloom. And when you're looking at, again, the effects in nature, other animals eat these same leaves, plants, herbs. Now they don't got their food. So now there's an interruption in the food chain in the animal kingdom. And now that's causing other resources to be eaten and in place of what was supposed to be there. And now the whole ecosystem is just interrupted. And that's going to affect what's left for the next year when, it's time to do your crop planting and everything. All of these changes happen because the flowers were insecure and didn't express themselves when they were supposed to. Change the whole course of the cycle. The whole ecosystem got interrupted because of that one decision. I'm insecure. I don't want to express myself. Not saying in a blaming matter, but your expression at each phase of your cycle matters. It's going to affect everything else. So if you somebody like me, keep tapping my mic, that was holding everything in, not expressing myself, it affected the way the rest of my cycle went, which is why I was having it eventually, that was holding stagnation. It eventually manifested physically. And now my period was hell every single month because I had stagnation, because I wasn't expressing myself properly. I wasn't even in tune with my cycle at all, as far as like the phases and everything. All I knew was period. That was it. But your expression at each stage matters. And like I said in the last episode, you can look at, in this episode we're looking at nature. Last episode we was looking at the body, how the body mirrors the mind. This episode we're looking at how nature mirrors what's happening inside of you. Just look at what's happening outside. That's what you should be doing for yourself. And again, different things will differ based on your energetic constitution, because expression, you might be somebody who expresses too much. If you thinking, oh, I need to express myself more, you're going to agitate your issue even further. Knowing your doshas and the direction that the flow of energy needs to go in order for balance to be restored is very important. That's what I help my clients do in my program. Now, my program applications are closed at this point in time, but my generic women's health products are designed to be energetically neutral, so that you can still support your body and learn the response mechanisms of your body. So if you're dealing with energetically neutral products, you can really see what's happening, because it's not necessarily agitating or pushing it too far in one direction. You can see, I take this, it's energetically neutral. This is how my body is responding. So you already getting a sense of awareness within yourself just by working with that. And if you decide after doing that, after working with the women's health products, that you need more guidance, or it's not something that you feel like you know how to do on your own, you just want guidance, you want support, then when the program open back up, then you can apply. But that's exactly what that's for, because yes, the generic or the frame of the processing is the same for every woman, because nature is just following the cycle of nature. But the nuances of it, like I was saying, the different types of drinks and stuff, foods and stuff that you're eating, and when it comes to expression, are you expressing too much, you letting out too much, or are you holding in too much? All of those things, like the personalized nuances, that's specific to you, and that's not something that you could just look outside and immediately know. That's gonna come with self-study. So the women's health products are helpful for self-study, but if you take those, work with those, and you decide that you need more support, then my program, I can help you. Guide you through that. But yes, energetics to the menstrual cycle. Look at nature. Everything is everything. As within, so without. Follow nature. Our cycles mimic the seasons. Follicular spring is our inner spring. Ovulation is our inner summer. Luteal is our inner fall. Menstruation is our inner winter. All the things that we do during these seasons outside are the exact same things we should be doing for ourselves inside, on the emotional and the mental level. The physically is going to be happening regardless, unless you have, severe imbalance. But follow the seasons, follow nature, and you'll be good. So, with all that being said, the next episode is going to be a heavy hitter. Really going to be getting into how the erasure of the divine feminine from the mental and spiritual plane has trickled down into what we currently are experiencing as far as the state of the world. And also connecting that specifically to how we as women are experiencing all of these disruptions and illnesses within our wombs. So yeah, 2 more weeks, a motherless society. We getting into it. I'll be linking my program page in the show notes or the description box, so you can read up on it. If you're interested in applying when it opens back up, you'll have information. And I'll also be linking my women's health products if you are interested in doing a little bit of self-study with some intentionally formulated neutral herbal products to help you start learning how your own energy moves. And then again, if you decide you need further guidance, then when the program opens back up, you already know what's going on. So I'll link all of that in the show notes, and I'll see y'all in 2 more weeks.